Okay, so one thing that I'm not happy about when I did this is that I put the stud just too close to the foundation wall, because in fact the stud doesn't sit directly on the foundation wall. It's got to sit on a pad because of course we don't want two hard materials ever kind of sitting right on top of each other. That's going to be a recipe for decay and so on. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to, as you can see, I'm zoomed up a little bit more, and we can still have, this was our sheathing was here. This is our sheathing here, and this was our honeycomb, and this was our brick. And we have a couple of things that we can add here now that we're zoomed up. So I'm going to add the stud, but I'm going to leave a little bit of space here underneath. Again, a 1/2 inch would be a good idea when you're drawing it to leave, because what I'm going to add is basically a compressible cushion underneath. It's basically like a rubber cushion that kind of sits underneath. And so that we're going to put in underneath here, just underneath the stud. And we want 2 gaskets, they're called. They're like little, they're basically, this is the foam gasket, and these are the caulking that kind of seals it. So you want to make sure that you get that in. So underneath your stud, put that in. Okay, so now we've got a couple of things that we're going to label here. Now that we're zoomed up, because we've got the basic composition of the whole wall. We actually, one thing that we can add that I didn't show before is that flashing piece. And if you remember, we've got some, I showed it in the last video, but it kind of comes up here, comes up like that, and cuts through there and goes along. And so basically what this does is that along any moisture that comes along the foundation wall kind of gets angled and brought out onto just outside, drips outside. And of course at some point out here is our ground level as well. So we've got our ground level. And we also could add, you're going to have to add your insulation within your wall. And this baseboard is often wood, so I can just kind of do that. And this is our gyps, so I'll add dots for the gyps. And this is very thin, so usually we can't see a texture in that. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my labels, and I'm going to start labeling. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is this. So I'm going to want to point to this that we just put in, and we're going to call it a foam gasket. In French, that's a coussin compressible sous la lisse. And as I promised, I will send out the French and English translation words. Okay, so the other thing that we've got these little sort of caulking pieces, and I've missed one here. We've got one also at the top between our asphalt impregnated board, which is this. And so our next piece that we want to add, or that we want to label, and this is in your architectural section, don't forget. So we've got this, and we've got this guy, and all those are caulking on backer rod. And hopefully you can understand my writing. Caulking on backer rod. My G's often look kind of funny. I did a better G for the foam gasket. Okay, so that's really important that we're going to see here. The other thing that we might see here is the 4-inch vinyl baseboard. We'll see that. We're going to see the 1/2 inch asphalt impregnable board or impregnated board. So that means it's just soaked in asphalt, basically. So that's over there. And down here, we are going to show this guy. And I'm just going to write it here. Although for you, pull it off. You don't put it in the ground. But I'm just going to put it here. Our polyethylene vapor barrier. Okay. Now, a couple of other things. So on the surface here of our building, one thing that we could add is we could add a surface here, just to this surface here. And this surface will go down a little bit. And usually that's referred to as parging. It's basically you don't see the foundation wall itself when you look from the exterior. It extends past the ground level, usually about a foot. So this surface. So we're going to want to go and label that. So we'll label this as an acrylic finish. And there are different types of finishes that you can use. The technology for that is changing all the time. Typically, it's a cement parging. This one is acrylic finish. And we're going to want to label our flashing. Flexible metal flashing. And the rest of our, so we want to add one more membrane, one more membrane before I forget. So we've got our flashing, and then we've got another membrane that kind of comes, I'm going to do it here, kind of comes and just goes behind the flashing for a little bit. And that membrane is also for water protection, because as you can tell, anytime there's a joint between two materials, that's when we have the biggest cause for concern of water damage. And this is going to be a peel and stick membrane. Minimum 6 inches. And those are all the details that we're going to see in the zoom up of this area. Now I'm going to go ahead and write on, let's see where I'm going to write it. On the side here, W1 and F1. So W1 we basically have. W1 is the composition from outside to inside, but we're going to write it. We're going to list it. And F1 is the composition of the floor. So let's just go back and review what W1 and F1 are. So F1, let's start with that one because we haven't really looked at it. So I'll do it up here, F1. So we have our floor finish. That's our first thing. That's our first level, our first item. Then we have our 4-inch concrete slab. And we're always going to say C structural. See structure drawings for details. Because we don't want to give too much information. Next, we're going to have our vapor barrier. And then our 2 inches rigid insulation. And 3 inches, and this could be fine aggregate or sand, and then at least 9 inches crushed stone. Nine inches minimum crushed stone. And we're going to do the same thing for W1. So you're going to list these on the side of your drawing, and you're going to list, now we already have W1 because we already did it. So you're going to list all the items from the brick, so then the size of the brick, list it, all the way down to your interior gypsum.